Hi everyone, welcome to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. We are your hosts Neil and Sunila. Today we are going to talk about a city that often is referred to as the Venice of the North. It is often known as the city of canals. We are going to talk about Amsterdam. But before we zoom into Amsterdam, it is always apt to talk about Europe because Europe becomes a popular destination for Indian travelers not only in the months of April and May, but actually over the last 2 years, it has become super popular over the course of the entire year. And as a result, let's first start by asking what Sunila thinks of Europe. So, Sunila, when I talk about Europe, what comes to your mind? What are maybe three things
Mm.
that you often think of?
Yes, Neil. I think one, it's the dream destination for most of us, right? So whenever I think of Europe, I think of the snow. That is the first thing that also comes to my mind, with all the Alps that are there, the mountain ranges, the skiing, and just year-round snow. And it's so easy to get up to the snow out there. So that's something I really enjoy about Europe. The second thing is I love the old towns in most of the cities. Wherever you go, there's just so much history, so much culture, so many things to do that on the one hand you have these new modern buildings coming up and modern architecture, but everywhere you go, every town has this beautiful old town. Every city has that. And just the cobblestone pathways, the cafe houses, the coffee houses, sitting by a coffee, just watching people go by, that's something I really really enjoy as well. And I think the third thing I enjoy is that within if you think of Europe as a country, and I like to do that sometimes, but there's just so much diversity. So when you move from one country to the other, in terms of language, sites, landscape, nature, attractions, food, everything changes. So there's just so much variety out there, and you can often combine more than one country, 10 countries, 12 countries also in a trip if you want to. So I think it's just stunning for me. The whole area is always a go-to for a beautiful trip.
That's a good way to put it. Not thinking
Mhm.
about Europe as a continent, but thinking about Europe as a country where you have all of these diverse cultures, diverse food habits, and different kinds of people that you'll come across. Now, when we were having a chat last week, I
Mhm.
asked you, Sunila, what do you want to take as a topic in the next
Yes.
episode of
Mhm.
Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life? Your immediate answer was, let's take Amsterdam. Now,
Mhm.
why was that? What about Amsterdam
Okay.
came to your mind and that it was so prompt? Like, what were you
That's
thinking?
true. Actually, there is a personal, ring to it, because I was speaking with my friends, and every year I do this trip with my friends, and we go somewhere. So we went to Greece and the Greek islands. We went to Berlin, Vienna, Prague, Budapest. So we were thinking what this year, and the easiest for us to meet is Europe because they are in the US. And the first thing that came to our mind was Amsterdam. And with the tulips are in, it's the tulip season right now. So that is another reason why the Netherlands in general was on my mind. And I felt like that was a country and a city that we haven't really explored too much, Neil. Like even in with our podcast or even as a whole, somehow we've not spoken enough about it. And there's so much to do there. So yes, one, I want to visit there with my friends and have a great time in Amsterdam. So it came to my mind very quickly. But secondly, and probably more importantly, we haven't really done justice to the region. We've never even spoken about it. So I thought it was important to at least start talking of it and get it. Let's start with Amsterdam for that. So yes.
Awesome. So, one
Mhm.
thing that really hits you the moment you
Mhm.
land in Amsterdam, and when I landed in Amsterdam, of course, Amsterdam has one of the best airports in the world, the Schiphol
Yeah.
Airport, right? And you
Yeah.
can take a train from there to the city center. And the moment you
Mhm.
get off the train and you get to the city center, you just see a flood of bicycles.
Yes.
Amsterdam is often
Yes.
known as the
The bike
place
city.
that
Yeah.
has more bicycles
Yeah.
than people, right?
Right.
And even as tourists, you can really
Mhm.
take a bicycle and ride around town.
Mhm.
So, what
Mhm.
has led to this? Why are there so many bikes in Amsterdam? I know that Copenhagen is also another city in Europe that is
Mhm.
very bicycle friendly. But what
Mhm.
led to this? Why do people prefer the bikes or prefer bikes over just general cars?
I think, Neil, if you've been to Amsterdam, you know how the city is built. And I think a lot of what happens with the city and what things you do and you get to see and experience, and even just riding a bike, it is all got to do with the geography and the architecture of the city, right? So Amsterdam is a city that is basically built on water. If you see
Hmm.
the city, it's a lot of canals, and everywhere you want to go, the canals are the best way to go. I remember when I was walking there. In fact, I was with Veena in Amsterdam a few years back, and everywhere we went, there were trams, there were bikes, there were like such well marked bike routes, and it just make life easier, because just think of it, the number of bridges and the wider roads and bridges you would need if you had to go everywhere by cars, when especially when you're building a city over a canal. So you have the canal belt, which is the UNESCO heritage, which has the UNESCO heritage site in Amsterdam. And you're connected by water, so it's probably easier to transport everything by water in Amsterdam rather than by road. So the roads that ended up being built were much narrower, and of course on narrower roads it's easier to get by on a bike as compared to a car. So I guess that was the reason that happened. And it's also a great exercise, right? So most people just go everywhere on the bike. Like, it's not unusual to see people in suits. Like, it's known as a finance area as well. Amsterdam is really popular for its financial offices and everything, and you see people riding bike in suits and a tie, and it's just so cute. So yeah, when you're traveling as well, you can definitely take a bike and just visit everywhere.
Yeah, because that was the first thing that struck me. And of course, like
Hmm.
you mentioned, the canals are the reason why it is known
Yeah,
as the Venice of the North, because the city has
yeah,
about more than 100 kilometers of canals, around 90 islands on last count,
yeah.
and of course 1500 bridges. So the canals
Mhm.
become an important part. One thing that I really liked about the canal culture over there is the fact that during the summers, and European summers are beautiful, right? The sun is
Yes.
shining all through the day, you have much longer days.
Mm.
During the summers, you can rent out a boat and just float on the canal with your family or friends, and
Mm.
you can have like a sort of picnic
Mhm.
by the canal. So that's quite fun. That's something that should definitely be on your bucket list if you are going to Amsterdam during the period of June, July, August, or September. But I should also warn you that during August it can get a little too
You
hot,
can
so
get, yeah.
that should also be there. Now, you mentioned the tulips, okay?
Mhm.
And the tulips are the reason many people go to Europe during a particular period. Of course, we'll soon reach the end of the tulip season. Soon, when I say soon,
It
in
is
of
2 2 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 But is the tulip season? What can one expect? And
Mhm.
is it as pretty as people claim it to be?
Mhm.
Because I've seen photos of it, but
Mm.
it's always good to know what I am going to see, right? So tell us a little bit
Mm.
about the tulip season.
Yeah, Neil. So, the tulip season, when I went there to Amsterdam, and I went to Keukenhof Gardens, that is exactly where you go to see the tulips. Of course, you can see them. I mean, you see fields everywhere around, but the gardens are one of the largest gardens in the world, and you go there. And I thought I was prepared, but I really wasn't prepared for what you see. And the tulips became popular with India, with Silsila, the movie, with Amitabh and Rekha walking in those tulip gardens. And that kind of created such a huge aspiration for all of us to go and see the tulips, that, oh my God, where is this place, and where are they walking? And the song was a super hit. So, it created this will to go there. And that's when I remember the first time I went to the tulip gardens. I think, I don't know if I told you this, but we had those old cameras and you had actual rolls and films. So I ran out of film in the garden because I just kept on clicking and clicking. And this was moons ago, many, many moons ago. And I ran out of film. I didn't have any more film. And I was so dejected because I thought that I could do more justice and click better pictures and more pictures. And I wanted the yellow and the red and all the colors. And of course, they had a kiosk and they had a gift shop, a little more expensive, but then you were in the tulip gardens, right? So I think that should tell you whether it lives up to its name or not. Today, it's so much easier. We have our digital phones and we can go on taking, you don't have to run out of battery, but otherwise you can, just click the photos to your heart's content. So what happens with the tulip gardens is that it's a little more structured, of course, and there are different shapes and formations, and there are other flowers as well. It's not just the tulips. So You can go in and see the others, but the main attraction is the tulips and the different colors of tulips. And the best part is, like, very often when you're going towards the tulip farm, you actually see the farms with the rows and rows of tulips that are being done. It was heartbreaking for me because when we walked out and, I went towards the end of the season, and I saw this tractor just chopping off all the tulips that were planted. Then I said, why would you do that? But of course they have to do it so that they have a better yield next year, and it's farming at the end of the day. So with the amount of flowers that they transport every day from Amsterdam to all around the world, but still they have to keep it going. So actually at the end of the season, they just take a tractor and they cut off all the tulips out there. So it was quite interesting. But you see these different and beautiful formations in the garden, so definitely worth a visit. Which also brings me, Neil, to one topic, that Amsterdam, when it became very popular and it became a thriving city, Netherlands became a beautiful, thriving country, there was something called the tulip mania. So what happened in the
Okay.
17th century was that the tulips got so much importance, undue importance, I would say, that it was one of the world's first economic bubbles. And the prices of tulips skyrocketed very high. It was like stock market at that point for the tulips. And people, lost a lot of money. People made a lot of money. And then the bubble burst because they realized that probably they were pricing it way too high than what it was supposed to be. So that's where the term tulip mania comes from. But the bubble may be over, but the beauty is still there. So it's amazing to go and see the tulips. So, but you have to plan it. So you must go from April until May and check the exact dates every year. It keeps changing.
Awesome. Now, speaking of tulips, I would
Uh-huh.
like to bring in a travel tip here because the
Yeah.
tulips, you go into a garden and the tulips are often knee high or waist high, right?
Yeah.
And often clicking photos at the tulip gardens, people don't know how to click photos because generally, if
Yeah.
you go and stand in a group and the tulips are
Hmm.
behind you, the actual beauty of the tulips is something that may not be captured in your photos. So what I've realized now is that any destination that I go to, I often like to go to Instagram, put in the hashtag. For example, I'll probably put hashtag Kukenhof Gardens or
Hmm.
hashtag Amsterdam Tulips. And then I sort them by reels. And then there are reels which tell you the best ways to click photos with tulips in Amsterdam.
Hmm.
Once you do that, you really understand that, okay, sometimes you can probably go and sit down next to the tulips. Sometimes doing a slow motion through the tulips is something that many people have started doing. And
Hmm.
there's trick photography happening everywhere. So if you want to make your photos or videos
Hmm.
look much better, this is one tip I would really ask you to follow, not only for the tulips but also anywhere you go, because there's always some Instagram creator or YouTube creator who has been there, and he or she, they want to really ensure that they create reels about how to click photos with
Hmm.
these tulips also. So you should definitely check that out. You also mentioned that Silsila is a movie that was
Hmm.
filmed there. Along with that, another movie that most of our listeners will know of is Queen, right? Kangana
Yes.
Ranaut goes on a
Yeah.
solo
Yeah.
honeymoon, and
Yeah.
Amsterdam has been featured there quite a lot. Along
Hmm.
with that, well, they often say, right, wherever Shah
Hmm.
Rukh Khan goes, um, travel follows. So, like Shah Rukh Khan
Hmm.
and Kajol made Switzerland famous
Hmm.
many years ago. There's Shah Rukh Khan and Anushka Sharma who were filming scenes of Jab Harry Met Sejal in
Yeah.
Amsterdam as well. Now, along with the canals, along with the tulips, another thing, a miniature thing that people really like talking about is a place called Madurodam, right?
Yes.
So, what
Mhm.
is Madurodam?
So Madurodam is this, I don't know, I don't want to call it a theme park, but it is this park where you see a lot of the main architecture and the buildings of Amsterdam in miniature form. And they are actually working. The best part is it's not like just a model that's been made and kept there for you to come see and go. It's very interactive. So if there's a canal, like if you go into and see the part where the Hague is, which is the capital of Netherlands, or you go in to the other places and see that it's actually working. So you have this these cute little trains that are running around. You actually have the canals and the boats that are going on, around, so you can see it in action, and you can see all of Netherlands in one place, and it's really quite beautiful. They love having Indians over. They've been marketing in India for a very long time. We've had a good relationship with them, so you feel welcome there as well, and you it's a beautiful way to enjoy. So very often, Neil, like, I mean, the tulips will last till May end, and then after that, what do you do with your time there? So this could be a great alternative to the tulip gardens, where you go in and you see and you spend your time in beautiful Madurodam. And again, like you mentioned about the photos in the tulip gardens, that's a very good idea. And you should definitely then also check up about Madurodam, because sometimes you can actually stand or sit and you have these funny photos where the structure is smaller than you are, and you have this very recognizable famous building, and then you're suddenly towering over it, or a windmill out there. Amsterdam is famous for its windmills as well, so you can have some really beautiful photo opportunities out there at Madurodam. So seeing the whole of Netherlands together in miniature is amazing. What I particularly enjoyed in Madurodam was, we know that we spoke about the canals of Amsterdam, right? And the entire city is made like that. So there are concentric rings of the canals, and where the canals go out to the sea, the whole city is built with this managing of the water levels, and the water levels are managed with the locks that are put in, where the river Amstel river, which runs through the city, is going out to the sea. And then when you're actually on the cruise, you can see the logs being opened up and the level of the water rising and falling, and then your cruise is going up and down. And all of this, you can see it in action in Madurodam. So you can actually see how the locks of the city work, and how the water levels of the city are, maintained out there. And incidentally, the name Amsterdam comes from this as well. So Amsterdam, the name comes from the river Amstel, which runs through the city, and the dam that was built over it. So that's why Amsterdam. And then, so definitely, when we do the canal cruise, even on our tours, we get to see how the locks work, and it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, like there's so much of the culture of of this city that is, like, connected to the canals, right? Because the city
Mhm.
was built on swampy land or marshy
Yeah,
land, so
yeah.
it's full of pillars. It's a city that is built
Mhm.
on pillars. But there's so much around these canals that really is about the architecture. Many of the travelers tend to go to Amsterdam just to check out the architecture.
Yeah.
It is also home to the world's narrowest house, is what they say,
Yes.
because it's located on a street which is known as Single Seven. And
Mhm.
basically Amsterdam tends to have really high tax laws, is what they say,
Mhm.
and that's why this narrow house was built, and it's often known as the world's um, narrowest house. Another interesting fact that came to my mind when I was researching about the episode is that
Mhm.
Amsterdam is known to have the world's longest or world's oldest continuously running stock exchange, which was founded
Mm.
in 1602
Yeah.
by the Dutch East India Company, and it's still running to this day.
Mhm.
So, very
Wow.
interesting things that you come across
Mhm.
when you are here. Now, along with the canals, along with the tulips, along
Mhm.
with uh, Maduro Dam and miniature Netherlands,
Mhm.
Amsterdam is also known for its museums,
Right.
and it's known to have more museums than many other cities in the world. And of course, I think one of the famous ones is the Van Gogh Museum. But
Mhm.
what is it about museums in Amsterdam? Why are there so many museums there?
Hmm. I think it goes back again to the history, Neil, because art was really flourishing out here. So when you speak of the famous artists, like I think one of the most famous Dutch artists, Rembrandt, and he was known to create amazing art. The best part is when you look at the paintings. Like, I think you will know many of them, even though if you don't know their names. Like, there is something called the Night Watch, and then you have Vermeer, who was also really popular, and he has one called the Milkmaid, and then there is the one of the girl with the pearl earring. So these are world famous masterpieces, and you can go and actually see all of them in the Van Gogh Museum. You can go and see the works of Vincent Van Gogh, who spent a lot of time in Amsterdam as well. and the sheer quality of the art really leaves you spellbound. So I think they just had so much that they had to have museums where they could keep it, and I'm so glad they did, because we can see it. Like, when you see a Rembrandt masterpiece, you know that it's not just about a painting. He's actually telling a story. So he's actually telling you, and it takes you back in time to that era when you can see what was being done. Like, it was kind of around the same time that that medicine and other things were becoming popular, and you actually have one of his paintings showing that, where someone's teaching anatomy to everybody. So it's not just a art piece, it actually gives you a glimpse of the life of how it was in those centuries. So I think they were so rich in art that they had to have a museum to keep all of that. So I think it's definitely worth, and you will end up visiting, I mean, at least one museum when you're in Amsterdam, if not more. 100%. Yeah.
So, like, if I were to plan a trip to Amsterdam, how many
Mhm.
days should like I spend in a place like Amsterdam?
So Neil, it depends. Like, if you're planning, we mentioned, we started speaking about this episode with Europe, and you have to kind of keep your priorities on. So if you're planning to do a trip to the multiple countries, then, like, say you have only 10-15 days, but you want to visit at least 6-7 countries, then obviously you will be left with 2 or 3 days. So I would take it the other way around, that decide how many days you have, choose what you want to do, and then choose how many days you can afford to spend there. So if you're really on this on a kind of tour or a holiday where you want to see as much as you can, then I would say start with a minimum of 2 nights at least, so you can capture most of the city's major attractions. You can be really quick, do the entire tour, Anne Frank's house, the canal cruise. And you mentioned, of course, the canals, Neil, some time back, and we also spoke of sightseeing. So one of the best ways to do the city tour, if you don't want to walk around, is sitting in the cruise and going on the canal. So in Amsterdam, one of the best ways to see the city really is to get into a cruise, enjoy your time. And you spoke of summer, it kind of works all year round. It's doesn't matter if it's raining or not, because you're in the cruise. So you don't really miss out on your city tour, and you really get a good idea and the glimpse of the city. So a canal cruise is definitely something I would recommend. So I would say start from 2 nights and then extend more, because there are a lot of things to do even outside Amsterdam, or like 20 minutes to half an hour outside the city. There's still so much to do. So you could go to The Hague, you could go to Scans, which is like an open air museum. You could go to some of the prettiest villages, go see the windmills, cheese factories. It's really famous and popular for that. There are clock factories, so many other things to do. So, starting from a minimum of 2 nights, if you have a week, you can still do a really good program in and around Amsterdam, and maybe add on one more city, Rotterdam or something else in the Netherlands.
Yeah, you mentioned The Hague, and me and my
Mm.
brother Raj a few years ago did go to
Yeah.
the International Court of Justice that is located there,
Mhm.
and we had a friend who was working there, so we got to see it from the inside, and
Wow.
that was a pretty cool thing. You mentioned
Yeah.
Anne Frank's house. That was the
Mhm.
house that Anne Frank and her family hid during World War II,
Mhm.
and that's where she wrote her famous diary. So that's also a place that you
Yeah.
should definitely visit. I would also add that while you are there, you should also
Mhm.
try to enjoy a Dutch meal, because a Dutch
Yes.
meal is very different. I don't think it is everyone's cup of tea,
Mhm.
because it is more, because it's near the canal. There is the herring fish that is a big part of Dutch food. There's also the stroop waffles that you can enjoy, that everyone tends to
Mhm.
like. So that has also been on my bucket list. Now, when we are thinking of this, do
Mhm.
you think it is advisable to rent out a bicycle and just take a tour of the city?
Mhm. Definitely, if you're used to riding bicycles, because I remember when you went, you rented, and then Raj could not ride a bicycle, right? So
Yeah,
we had to give
we
it
had to
back.
just keep the bikes for 2 days in one place and then give them back.
Walk around everywhere. The
Yeah,
best part of the city is that it's quite walkable. You can walk everywhere. So you can take the tram, you can walk, you can do it. If you're used to riding cycles, and, of course, follow the local rules, because they are pretty pretty strict about how they are going around with the bicycles, definitely rent out a bike and go around, because it's the fastest way to get around, and you'll do more. I guess you can cover a lot more when you're on the bicycle as compared to when you're walking. So I would definitely suggest doing that. Neil, I want to just add one point. You also mentioned about the architecture of Amsterdam, and you mentioned about the tax laws. And when I went there and I did a tour, one of the things I learned was, like, and it's true not just of Amsterdam but everywhere in Europe. If you notice the homes, you mentioned the narrow street. When you look up, you'll see that that the highest floor of the building usually has the smallest windows, and the lower floors
Hmm.
usually have bigger windows. And that is true in most of the places in Europe, if you look at the townhouses. And the deal was that you used to get taxed according to the window size. So the servants usually occupied the higher floors. Things are have changed a lot now, and then that's why the windows were always kept small, so that the tax was low. And in Amsterdam especially, people also go to see the gables. So these were like, they were attached to the top of the building. And because of the canal, and because everything was so narrow, how do you get things inside the house? There's no space. So they used to actually haul it up by a pulley, like a cable and pulley system, from these gables, from outside, straight from the window into the house, and not from like the staircase or the normal route of opening a door and getting furniture in. So you're actually like hoisting furniture up through a window. So that's something you actually see that happening even today in the historic center in Amsterdam when you're out there.
One of the other cool things is that they often do a canal cleanup in Amsterdam. And
Uh-huh.
because the canals are designed in such a way that there's the road and there's no
Mm,
fencing and there's the canal. So
mm,
a car can drop into the canal, a
mm,
bike can drop into the canal.
mm.
So they often have this thing where they clean up the
That is
canals, and
funny.
the
Mhm,
the amount of random things that they come
mhm,
across. There are bikes, sometimes they find cars that they don't know, like, have been
mhm,
sitting in canals for a long, long time.
mhm.
They find people, because if you're walking on a bridge, you can drop hundreds of things, right?
Yeah.
You'll find phones, you'll find GoPro cameras and all of that. So that's pretty cool. So that's one thing that I would also recommend, that yes, take a bike, but
Mm,
if you're enjoying the nightlife and if you have been drinking, I would say do not
mm.
ride a bike,
Yes.
because that can be dangerous. Like I said at the start of the episode, more bikes than the number of people that are there in this city. So you, similar to how if you want to drive a car around any city, you need a license or an international driver's license. The bike laws over here are also quite important. If you're turning left, you have to
Yeah.
really indicate with your hand. If you're turning right, you have to indicate with your hand. There are traffic lights for bicycles so that no one crashes into each other. So yep, Sunila, we've discussed a fair bit
Mhm.
about Amsterdam. Do you think we've missed out on anything, or what would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think one thing, Neil, we can definitely add is you mentioned the local food. With the local food, you can also taste the local beer. And one of the most famous beers comes from Amsterdam. One of the world famous beers, Heineken, is from Amsterdam. And they actually have this Heineken experience, which is, when the oldest Heineken brewery that was made. So I think it dates back to 1867 or something. And you can take a tour here and learn about how beer was made, and it's quite an immersive experience. You can also taste the beer out there. So I feel like in Amsterdam, with all these tasting trips that you do with the beer, and if you go to a cheese setup, you have a lot of cheese tasting. You can actually just make a meal out of these tastings that you do. It's amazing. So go have your cheese, come back, go to the Heineken and have your beer, and then go back and really actually sit down and enjoy a nice meal out there on the terrace overlooking a canal, and you'll have a great holiday. So I think there is Amstel and there are many other brands, but I think Heineken is something that
Yeah, it's a
almost
massive
everyone knows.
factory, right?
Yeah, it's
It's
huge.
like this
So
huge, and
yeah,
I guess it's a
yeah,
rite of passage for anyone who loves beer, because everyone
yeah,
who goes to Amsterdam tends to go visit
yeah.
that. Awesome. I think, Sunila, that was a good, well, uh, understanding about Amsterdam, the best things to do, what you should really look out for, and what you should do in this amazing city that is often known as the Venice of the North. So, listeners and viewers, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. Like always, I'd like to say that if you really liked our episode, or if you want to give us feedback, or if you want to request us to take up interesting topics, please do write to us at Neil, Neil, @veenaworld.com, or Sunila, Sunila, @veenaworld.com. We'd love to hear from you because most of the topics that we take up are requested by our listeners, and that is what helps us keep this going. So thank you so much. We'll see you the next time. Until then, as we always say at Veena World, keep celebrating life. Bye.
Bye bye.